certainly not the time to pick up a fight on data between regulators and members of the industry, but still, Xavier, you have some questions to Isabelle and Nicolas, and you have 10 minutes to do so.
I know. So a very quick question first, which is the first one regarding harmonization on a global scale. So we talk about the privacy shield between Europe, France, of course, and US, but what about Asia?
It's a very interesting question because Asia is a growing actor in terms of data. The idea is not for Europe to be isolated and not to have any conversations with the Asiatic countries. So what did we do? We started this conversation 3 years ago, and we said we probably are not going to have right now a common framework. So let's try to articulate our regional frameworks. We have what it's called BCR in Europe, so it's a framework to frame the international data flows. You have almost the same in Asia. So we're going to articulate through an agreement the European BCR and the APEC CBPR. And so we signed up this agreement with the FTC, Working Party 29, so the network of the European DPAs that I'm chairing, and the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, for the APEC countries. So we signed this agreement 3 years ago. And concretely, it means for the global actors to have the possibility to identify what is common in each referentials, what is different. And if they want to play internationally, to have the guarantees needed for one region and guarantees needed and added for the other regions. So I think we're not going to have a common and total uniformed common framework, international common framework immediately. But we have to work together to learn what are our real differences and what are our commonalities. And in fact, there are growing commonalities. For that, we have this agreement. We have also the international conference. The international conference collects, groups, all the data protection authority within the world, and we are meeting every year. And I can see in this conference that, you know, the people are converging. And of course, we have cultural diversities, we have political diversities, and it's not so easy to converge. But cooperation is growing, and we will be able, I think, within a few years, maybe, to give a common framework to the global actors.
Nicolas, you're a global player, so from your point of view, the fact that there is today not yet some kind of harmonization, how do you address that as a company? Do you take the most constrained regulation and you try to have your organization complying to that, and then you try to adapt to each specific country? Russia, for example, no. we could speak about Russia also, but how do you do practically?
Well, first, as I said, first you have to have high standard in your own company. And you know, when you say security by design, we don't have to adapt because that's where we were. So as long as you build this in your DNA, if it is, that's good. If it's not, you have to, and that's a more transformation. That's very important. So you have to have high standard on this thing. Second, then you have to be compliant. There's no doubt, and you have to adapt. And by the way, you have to help your customer to adapt to, because most of them are global player. Not only the big one, small, enterprise are also global players. And they will be hit by all this regulation that are supposed to protect them, but at the same time, if they are too complex, you are putting security, leak into the system, because if it's too complex, nobody understands, and therefore, nobody can apply, even if you have high penalties. So that's what we do. We high standard on one side. Second, we're trying to be part of these, discussions to bring a very balanced view, and we're trying to do our best here. And third, you have to comply. We think that what is going to be important in GDPR, etc., is how you implement. Because if you have something which is done, but then the implementation is tweaked by every country, that's even worse. So predictability is important for us. We can adapt to anything, as long as, even if we don't like it, as long as it's predictable and it's on the time.
Isabelle, just before you told me that you don't believe that data legislation could be an economic weapon? You said no. So can you just elaborate on that? For example, just to give an example for everybody, I mean, I read an article recently saying that Russia was blocking LinkedIn in Russia because they were not complying to the data privacy rules specific to Russia. So I mean, there's a big impact in terms of business. So do you think it could become a weapon or not? Data regulation.
Before I answer your question, I just want to react to what the previous speaker just said about the way the regulation has to be understood and clear. And I think it's very important. And in Europe, we have this GDPR. And honestly, the GDPR is a rather complex cathedral. You know, it's made by lawyers. But to start from that and to have the operational toolbox, it takes quite a while. So we have 18 months at the European level to do the translation into an operational toolbox. And this is the job of the Working Party 29, to be able to issue from the text, from the GDPR, operational guidelines within the next month. And we are about to issue the first guidelines in December. And I wanted to stress this point because sometimes we have very often remarks of that kind. And so I want to tell you very simply that this is our main focus with the Working Party 29, to be able to simplify and to translate into clear legal requirements the GDPR to the data controllers.
And just a quick question on that part, sorry. So it applies to everybody? You're a big company, you're a startup, you have to comply?
Oh yes, I mean, you have to comply. The obligations can be a bit different, but the basic principles are the same. Then, coming to your question, can it be an economic weapon? Maybe it can, but it's not the intention of Europe.
Of course.
It's not the intention of Europe. It is privacy protection, as I said, is a growing competitive argument. So there is going to be competition around data protection, and we can see it from various examples. Look at what happened with WhatsApp and Facebook recently. At the beginning, Facebook and WhatsApp said we're going to combine through the merger all the data from our customers, and then after most of these customers had said in various European countries that they didn't want it, now WhatsApp and Facebook have said no, maybe we're not going to do this, and the database will say separately. So it means that what I'm saying is just not theoretical, it is real from the consumers' expectations. So there is no intention of Europe to have economic arms or weapons. What is the European intention is to put all the actors acting on the European territory on an equal competition basis. And it was not the case before, because before some international actors could argue the fact that they were not established in Europe, leading them not to respect the European guarantees. Tomorrow, 2018, it won't be possible because once you target European consumers, as I said, you have to respect the legislation. Is this an economic weapon? I don't think so. I think it's just to have equal competition conditions for all the operators in Europe.
Now, what I mean by that is, and maybe Nicolas, you can elaborate on that, is, of course, from the European standard view, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily an economic weapon, but if you have different regulation in other countries where the cost of compliance is lower, and there are less restrictions to develop new products, new services, then how do you compete with these newcomers? I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, we could, but if we are discussing about the data, I think there's something bigger right now. Like when you're a consumer and you're downloading an application, you give rights to some corporation to have access to your data. You don't know what they're doing with it. They do business, but you don't know. IBM is competing with these kind of things. When we need data, we buy the data. We bought billions of dollars of company in healthcare, where we had data, anonymized data, but we had data. We bought a Weather Channel company, which is data, but we buy the data. Some companies do not buy the data. So for me, this is like different business models. Now, it's okay to provide you data if you're okay to give it for free. Now, if you don't know what they're doing with it, there is privacy, but there's a value to that. So this is the discussion that's really going to happen. Then how much it costs you to, when you look at the labor law, when you look at everything, the taxes, this is one more thing in terms of competitiveness. Now, protectionism is something different. If you cannot operate, if you don't have the data in a given country, or you cannot do business because that's going to be a different issue.
And that's all we have time for. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much to the three of you for the discussion and perspective.